Hello, everybody. Well, today is a big anniversary in Beatles history. It was 60 years ago today, on April the 4th of 1964, where the Beatles held the top five spots, number 1 through 5, on the singles chart on Billboard, the Hot 100. Now, everybody talks about this, and everybody thinks it's a wonderful achievement. And I know as a Beatles fan, I'm always trying to give the Beatles a few extra points and always say, hey, the other groups never accomplished this. The Beatles were the only ones to accomplish that. And I'm always coming up with examples to kind of show how great the Beatles were. And I am a huge Beatles fan, though lately I've made a couple of videos, one of them being a little controversial. You can go back on it, where I said, even though I love the songs, there were about 10 of them at least, if not more, that I'm a little kind of overdosed on, that I'm a little tired of, a little fatigued on. And that really drew a lot of reaction, thinking I wasn't really a fan, which is silly. I love the Beatles, as you can see. But the thing is, I like to try and be fair. And this is something I'm going to talk about in this video, that I wonder if I'm right about this, and I wonder what your thoughts are, where I'm going to debunk the myth that the Beatles having the top five songs on April 4th, 1964 in the Hot 100 Billboard singles charts is such a big accomplishment. No artist has ever been able to equal this. Nobody's ever matched or surpassed this. The Beatles are the only ones, but there's a reason for it. And I want to see if you know where I'm coming from and if you follow me. All right. So the top five songs were Beatles songs. But not only the top five songs, elsewhere on the Hot 100 charts on this date in 64, there were 7 other songs in the same 100. The Beatles had like 12 songs. I think it was 7 other ones. They had a total of 12 songs in their top 100. But for the purposes of this video, we're just going to concentrate on the top 5. First, let's go through the songs. Number 1 on this date in 1964, we had the Beatles with Can't Buy Me Love. Okay, and that was on Capitol Records. And there's a reason why I'm going to be showing you what label these were on, okay? Number 2 on the Billboard charts on this date in 64 was Twist and Shout, different record label, Tolly, small label, okay? Tolly label, number 2. Another small label, number 3 on the charts was She Loves You. And this was a small label called Swan. So far, we've got 3 different labels, okay? Are you with me? Number 4 on the charts on this date was I Want to Hold Your Hand. But we go back to Capitol for this. This is another Capitol record, just like Can't Buy Me Love was on Capitol in the U.S. And finally, the number 5 song was Please Please Me from the VJ Records, another label entirely, VJ. All right. This is such a big feat, everybody says. Unmatched, let alone surpassed. No other artist, group, or solo has been able to accomplish this in all these decades. Well, here's my theory. Do you know why that is? Because no other artist ever had 5 singles out during the peak of their popularity on different labels to entice the buying public. Let me go into more detail here. I showed you the different labels for these, right? You have Capitol, you have Tolly, you have Swan, you have VJ. The Beatles were huge, as we know. Beatlemania was running rampant in April of 1964. The Beatles were it. The Beatles were the biggest thing going. And because they were the biggest thing going, there were some other record companies. Everybody tried to get a piece of the Beatles. Whenever something is very popular, naturally what you want to do is you want to try to go in there. You want to call it a money grab? Fine, whatever. Everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon. In this case, the Beatle bandwagon. They're very hot. So they have 5 singles out. Every one of these different labels trying to get a nut, like a squirrel, trying to go around there and get their 1 or 2 nuts, their piece of the pie. When have you ever heard of a popular artist, group, or solo that was so popular at the time that record companies scrambled to put out whatever they could at the same time? on different labels. That's why this has never happened before, because this never occurred for any other artist before, right? It just never happened that I know of. Maybe you can prove me wrong. Let's use other artists that have been very popular. Let's say, I don't know, Michael Jackson or Madonna, or you want to use Taylor Swift, or you want to use anybody. Back in the day, in the 60s, you had to go out to the store if you were a fan. And if you liked the Beatles, you had to buy, physically purchase, go into the store, put down your money, and buy the record. Now, there's 5 records. You love the Beatles. You can't get enough of the Beatles. You're a kid or a teenager in the 1960s. The Beatles are the hottest thing, greatest thing since sliced bread. You can't get enough. You want every song you can. You want every record in your collection. You want it all. So you're going to go in there and you're going to buy 5 singles. You're going to buy as many of the singles as you can. And of course, there were several others in this top 100 too, not just the top 5. But they're offered. They're available to you. Michael Jackson didn't have 5 songs when he was at his peak, 5 singles at the same time by different artists, I don't think. Same thing with Madonna. Whoever the big stars are, Justin Bieber, now you'd say Taylor Swift. Of course, the Beatles were the only ones to ever accomplish this because, to my knowledge, which is, not always foolproof. Sometimes I make mistakes like anybody else. But as far as I know, nobody else ever had the same playing field. The playing field's not level. Of course, you can't have the top 5 singles while you're at your hottest if you don't have 5 singles out there, and particularly at the same time from different labels. That's the way you got your music back then. That dynamic has never been repeated. So because that dynamic was never doubled or repeated, the Beatles were the only ones that ever had the opportunity to do it, All right, so that's my theory on this. But I want to go a step further and talk about today, in the 21st century. Let's talk about the biggest of the big, right? Taylor Swift. Today, it's kind of the same principle, only different. Taylor Swift has achieved all of this great acclaim and all this great success and marketing, all this wonderful stuff. And I don't follow today's charting like I used to do in the old days. But today, my understanding is the chart is different. The Billboard charts in the U.S. anyway. If you like an artist, you download that song, you stream it, and the hits are compared to the Beatles today by streaming. Some people may say, oh, Taylor Swift has surpassed the Beatles. Taylor Swift has done better than the Beatles. She's got more hits from streaming than the Beatles ever did. Well, look, today it's different. It's a different playing field. Same as I said, 1964 was different, and the Beatles were different. Same thing's different in another way today. Today you can have a lot of big hit songs just by streaming. If anybody streams a song from Taylor Swift or whoever's the biggest, we use Taylor Swift because we know how popular Taylor is right now. If you want to go out there and you want to get Taylor Swift music, all you got to do is download 1, 2, 3, 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 Taylor Swift songs, and it's all right there. Back in the 1960s, you had to actually go into the shop, had to go into the store, physically get off your butt, go into the shop, walk down there, and plunk your money on the desk and pick out a 45. So I don't really count the charts today being the same as they were in 1960s, okay? So that's why I'm trying to say, in a way, Taylor Swift has a similar situation where her hits are calculated in a way today that the Beatles didn't have a chance. The Beatles never had that chance. Had the Beatles been able to have the same luxury of having every one of their songs, of every one of their albums available for download or streaming or whatever it is, clicking on, and that would count as a chart hit, the Beatles would have had 200 chart hits, obviously. Every song would have been downloaded a million times in the 60s, So that's really where I'm going with this. I'm trying to say that if it's not the same level playing field for everybody, naturally some people are going to have advantages. The Beatles, in the right place at the right time, having the luxury of 5 singles by one, two, three, four different labels, all scrambling to get a piece of the action, all out there for the consumer to go and purchase all at the same time. That's never happened since that I know of. That's why the Beatles are the only ones that ever accomplished it. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Thanks.